And we will try to screw it up less next time, although we can't possibly screw it up as badly as the city is screwing this up.
And
what an appropriate introduction. Welcome to the This Week in Worcester podcast. I am Tom Marino, host of this, editor of This Week in Worcester. I'm here with Mr. John Edward Keogh. He is obviously the co-host of this podcast. He is the president of Hollywood Film Group. He is executive producer of Manny J Media. He's a contributor to This Week in Worcester. Hey, John.
what's up there, Tommy? How you doing?
Oh, nothing. It's been a quiet week in Worcester.
Yeah, nothing's going on. I don't think. I mean, not that I know of.
Nobody's upset about anything.
I mean, have you heard anything? I
city
feel
manager's
like
really crushing it lately.
budget. They're going to do the budget meetings.
What's the police department doing? Making leaps and bounds and restoring confidence in the community.
Everybody, like the police department is doing good stuff. Everybody's feeling good in the city of Worcester this week. I think that's what I heard.
Just when you thought it couldn't get worse, here we are.
Yeah.
If you are watching this and you haven't heard of this story, you have to be living on the moon. On Thursday,
there was broadcast to the moon, so
Yeah, right. You could be on the moon and still have learned about this. On Thursday morning, ICE agents, federal immigration and customs enforcement agents, appeared on Eureka Street in Worcester Square, and from what I understand, or from what we understand from reports of those on the scene, is ICE first detained the daughter of a woman to compel the woman to present herself, and then apprehended, I guess is the word, seized a woman, a city resident, who allegedly is undocumented and in the country unlawfully, allegedly. Many people from the neighborhood and from across the city appeared on the scene, and there was a tense exchange between residents and those, again, alleging to be federal agents. And I say that because they refused to show any identification, refused to produce any paperwork at all, refused to identify themselves at any way, and certainly didn't present a warrant for this woman's arrest. The Worcester Police Department responded to what it says were 911 calls, both saying that there were federal agents surrounded by people, and that federal agents were attempting to take possession of a woman without presenting any identification or warrant. And the Worcester Police Department showed up with significant force, and based on the videos I've seen, I don't know how else you could phrase it, as facilitated ICE absconding this woman and leaving the scene. The city manager, it is both state law and the city manager has said publicly that city resources shall not be used in the enforcement, in any enforcement of immigration law. That's also state law. State and local resources are not to be allocated to the enforcement of immigration law. The police department's obviously going to dispute this and say they just showed up to keep the peace. And but it's hard. Based on the video that has been all over the internet, body camera footage not yet released, that they at least ensured that those people could leave with that woman in their vehicle. And the Worcester Police Department has not asserted, nor has anybody did anybody that I've talked to that was at the scene say that these people were ever identified or verified to actually be federal agents. I just put up a piece a few minutes before we went on. It says the city of Worcester's story on its title rather is the city of Worcester's story on May 8th has huge holes. The city contends that it did not know that ICE was in the vicinity in the city. Did not know that it intended to conduct this apprehension. And the first that it heard of it was when it was called via 911 as this event was happening. If that's the case, and they didn't verify who these people were, that's deeply troubling.
It is. It is. As we've been writing about it this week, there's been a lot of the pushback is, they don't have to, and they don't need to do a warrant, and they don't need to do all those things. But it really opens up then really serious questions, because Chief Saucier, as you pointed out, recently said that apparently there might be a scourge of people impersonating the police, right?
An epidemic.
So
it's responsible for decades of sexual assault and sexual and other sexual misconduct allegations against folks inside certain individuals inside the police department. Absolutely an epidemic.
Right, and then those people kind of focus on the most vulnerable populations, right? So folks that are on the fringes economically, and in this case, if you have someone who is maybe maybe in part of the immigration process or not, again, none of that has been confirmed. Not a single piece of evidence has been produced to say that this person was actually facing a detainer. Like they still haven't even produced the detainer. And normally, at least nationally, you have seen the Trump administration rush with all due speed to post paperwork on every TV channel they possibly can.
Even photoshopped images they've used.
Yeah, they just post it everywhere. So in this case, we still don't even know if there was actually a detainer. And according to the lawyer for the family, there is no legal issue, right? So, I mean, that process is going to, hopefully work itself out. And maybe because of the spotlight on it, maybe it won't be able to be allowed to be worked out in secret. But the confusing part of this realistically comes back to this long story that you and I have been covering, and many other local media people have been covering, is just the abject failure to communicate normally in any high pressure situation from the city administrators, both whether it's current city manager Eric Batista and his prior two predecessors. The city of Worcester literally is known for just not knowing how to say anything, and they just don't know how to do it. They don't know how to write. They don't know how to talk, and they say the wrong thing always at the wrong time. And so the press releases the dueling press releases from the police department, and then with Tom Duffy being the lead, and then the one from the city manager, basically, I wash my hands of this, right? Very Pontius Pilate of him. Like, it's not my bad. I got nothing to do with this. When there's an opportunity for people to step up and be leaders. And I think you and I both thought that Councilor Pasillo put out a really good statement.
That's how you do it, folks.
That was leadership in the time of crisis. But not only her, I mean, I have to say, I know that she doesn't really want to be in a public kind of facing way right now. But, I think that Ashley Spring, I thought that the way that she handled herself, again, I'm not going to report the exact words because, it was kind of a personal moment. But when she was released from custody after her arrest, I thought that her words were powerful and strong. I thought that Attell's were powerful and strong. I thought that there were other leaders, community leaders and advocates that have spoken clearly in the time of what if we truly are connected to the community of Worcester, this is an actual crisis. Like, this is an actual crisis where our community members are being snatched up, and it doesn't matter whether she does have a criminal history or not. That doesn't mean anything. The whole point is that we don't want to normalize this idea of masked agents, in the middle of the day in secret operations, just disappearing people off the street with no opportunity for an attorney or a family member or anything. And I really think about this, Tom, a lot. What happens if that crowd didn't come? What would happen to the baby and the teenager then? Would they even be here?
Right. That's a good question. And the other question is, folks have been, folks that are in the know. Mark Henderson, who was an executive or I forget what his title was, but he was at the Telegram and Gazette for a long time. He now runs the 016.com. Well versed, somebody I rely on, for advice or guidance when I'm in a spot and I don't know what to do next, because, I've comparatively, I've only been doing, been in this business, we started this site now going on 8 years ago. And, so, I mean, I need places to seek counsel with folks. So Mark knows a lot of stuff, and he posted on Twitter that he searched as much as he knows how, and that's a lot, through, what's available online from the Massachusetts courts and court dockets. Can't find this woman's name anywhere, contrary to the assertions by the federal government that this person's been arrested for assault and battery on a pregnant person.
Yeah. And I did the same search. I reached out to all my sources that I can that have access to those kind of things. And we can't even find the name on any criminal docket ever. In fact, we were talking about this before the show. I've only been able to find 6 people that have this name that I can find, and 2 of them have passed away. So, I mean, and none of them had any criminal offenses registered to their name of any kind. And then not only that, and at the federal level, on the ICE detainer thing, which is, in my article, I reported on Acrame. Which Acrame is the database that the feds use to tell agencies about people that they're going to have detainers on, right? And every police officer has access to that in the city of Worcester. It's right in their little tablet thing. So if you got arrested, the federal detainer would come up, right? If you got stopped for traffic or something like that, it would come up.
Like
and no one anywhere in the country can find this person's even the immigration detainer. So again, now maybe there was one issued undercover at night, but so is this woman like a super secret spy? Is she John Wick?
Given the dozen or plus agents that were there, and then I've seen numbers up to 40. Was the police officer showed up?
Yeah.
It was dozens. Think this was Pablo Escobar himself.
Yeah.
Back.
I mean, the response to this was as if this person was a violent danger. And then if you go read the ICE's, that's exactly what the district, the deputy director of ICE, in New England, in their press release said that this dangerous, violent, illegal, criminal alien, dangerous, violent, criminal alien. But there's no evidence of it, none at all. And when people ask, okay, well, can you show us the documentation? Silence. I reached out to the chief of police himself. Silence. I reached out to the city manager himself. Silence. There's no response to these questions. Did you identify it? Did a police officer ask for identification? Can I just call in and say I'm a federal agent in trouble, and then they're going to show up?
Yeah, I can buy some ICE stuff online, and then when the Worcester Police Department shows up, they'll see that I'm a lord too, and they'll treat the peasants like they're peasants.
Oh, can I just throw a vest on that says ATF and just walk around the city of Worcester, and I'm just going to get to do all kinds of fun stuff? Like I could just, snatch up Maria or something like that because I'm rocking my ATF jersey. Is that how it goes? Because that seems to be how it goes. And then when you ask these questions, which I think are reasonable questions, no, we're not even saying, okay, if there is an immigration issue, maybe you do have to deal with it. Okay. But we can't ask who this person is. I can't say who are you? Show me your identification. I can't ask those things.
No.
Since when? Since when did that happen?
So,
and
if you just put an ATF vest on, you can do anything you want. No, anybody asks you, you just say, "I'm not identifying myself." There's no crime you can't commit.
So
Yeah,
Stephen,
Stephen Sklamo.
So
we just discussed that nobody can find a record of that, and I'm talking
there's
about
no record of that.
Yeah, people that have been journalists longer than me, and other folks that understand how to do this research. Nobody can find a record of this woman ever being arraigned.
No, none at all.
Nobody can find that there's a detainer on this person. Nothing.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that's it's mind-boggling. It's from a press release that was released only, by the way, if you go look at that press release, it was released only to Fox 25. So then if you go look at the Channel 5 report and the Channel 7 report and all the other reports, they in their reports it says, as was reported to Fox 25. So not only that, the federal government apparently is only issuing press releases to one organization. I don't know if they realize that Fox 25 in New England is not Fox News. It's not the same thing, guys. It's just not. It does say Fox, and you can watch The Simpsons on that channel, but it doesn't necessarily mean that they're the same thing as Fox News. Maybe they don't realize where they are. Gene Levanchi is still on there, as far as I know. So I mean, there's it was very interesting to see that it was only released to Fox 25. Not normally.
Just to touch on that for a second. So somebody's arrested. That usually doesn't typically, unless the police department decides to do a press release on it, doesn't necessarily release your name. But once you're arraigned, that's usually once a person is arraigned. I mean, now there's a public record of it, right? Because I mean, your name at least is on a docket somewhere. So you can't. You can't hide it, right? Because it's been in open court. And as I said, there's been a lot of research done in the last few days on this, and nobody can find a record of this person ever being arraigned for anything.
Yeah.
And that's not. I mean, it's usually something you can find. Speaking from experience, it's usually not that tough. If you're looking to see if a person's at least been charged with something and been arraigned, it's usually pretty easy to find. Should be readily accessible.
Yeah, it should be. So to Michelle Arnold, there's no record that she's even here illegally. There's no record that there's an immigration detainer, which normally is the case. By the way, in this particular case, when immigration detainer is filed, that goes into the record system. It's not the same as an arraignment, right? So there's a database that you can go and do it. So an attorney who is going to represent someone in that case can go and look for his client's information. In this case, the family has an attorney, and there is no docket that has a detainer registered, which is against the policy. By the way, a policy that was written under the first Trump administration just recently, because they changed the order of it back the first Trump administration, and the Biden administration kept that process in place, which is that there's two different kinds of detainers, which I discuss a little bit in the article I wrote for you earlier today. There's a difference. There's a civil detainer. That's someone who is potentially subject to deportation, and that could be from they came to the country and they overstayed their visa, their green card ran out or is up for renewal, or maybe they did come here over the border or whatever. Those there's multiple things like that. And then there's criminal detainers, which are different, and it's a completely different thing. In this case, neither of those seem to exist. So it's interesting that everybody Michelle is in the chat saying that she was arrested, but there's no record of that arrest. There's none. It doesn't exist. So the only evidence we have at all that it even exists is a press release, which was released by the deputy director for New England for ICE to Fox 25. That's it. There's nothing else to say that anything related to this case is true. Now let's stop for a second. Look at the national news. I'm not even going to talk about CNN, NBC, none of that. Let's just stick with Fox News. On Fox News, Lindsey Graham and what's his name, John Kennedy and John Cornyn, right? So three prominent Republican senators have questioned the Trump administration openly for multiple mistakes where they have picked up the wrong person, right? That's where we're at, right? So but Fred, there's no
record of that, Fred.
There's no record, Fred.
The
So you
facts
can say
are
what
that
you
it
want.
appears that this is made up, so far at least, because this person's not been arraigned for any crime.
Or,
That's how the
listen,
justice system works. You're arrested and then you're arraigned, and you
right.
cop a plea. You either say not guilty or guilty, and then the process goes on, and you have to go to 7,000 hearings before you actually have a trial. But there's
and then
no
the Secretary of
docket
State,
with this person's name on it.
the Marco Rubio has admitted publicly that they have made multiple mistakes with names. They had to admit publicly that they sent emails with threatening letters to almost every immigration attorney in the country, because those happened to be the emails that they had in the system telling those people to self-deport. This is not and then President Trump himself now on his interview with the Atlantic, and then again in his interview with Fox News just a couple weeks ago, said himself, mistakes happen. It's not going to be completely perfect. So, Fred and Michelle, what if this is one of those mistakes? The president has admitted that they're making mistakes because of the volume of processing they're doing. No one's ever done this. There's no presidency that's ever done this fast, this aggressively at this level. It's just never happened. So it's never happened in history. I know the argument's going to be Obama deported more people, sure, and he did, but that was over an 8-year period. The Biden administration deported a bunch of people too, but that was over a 4-year period. Sure, those are true statements, but they didn't do it in 90 days. Okay, they did not deport this many people in 90 days. If you took the number of the deportations that have happened in the 90 days, it will break the record for deportations in a single term by far. Just going to blow it away. That's numbers from ICE themselves. If you go to their website, they celebrate the volume that they've been doing. It's on their pages. Like, we have already deported XXXXX. They got like a running tally on there. It's insane. And so these are things that when we say this, these are legitimate questions to ask. And the president himself has admitted that there's mistakes being made.
Yeah, I mean, whatever he says is,
No, but what I'm saying is, to the people who support President Trump, right? Fine, I don't care who you voted for. He is saying they've made mistakes. He says that. If he says that, do we don't believe him? It's like, so we only believe Tom Homan now, the Department of Homeland Security guy, because he says we're just perfect and we do everything right.
Or do we just believe whatever the federal government says, even though there's no evidence to support what they're saying?
By the way, let's talk about this real quick, Tom. That's a great thing. Just 6 months ago, this group of people, the Republican administration that currently exists, was accusing the Border Patrol of abject failure, right? For months and months and months. By the way, do you know who worked for them back then? Tom Homan. He worked for them. He's been in federal government for almost 30 years. So when did he become trustworthy? Because just last year, he was not trustworthy. Just last year. So now we're going to believe everything he says because he works for the Trump administration? That's not true, Fred. Again, you don't know your own country. The 14th Amendment, there's no respect of persons. These are things that are basic understandings. We have an education problem in our country, Tom, too, for
yeah,
sure.
I mean,
where people don't
if you
know
read
their own
the natural born citizen clause in the Constitution that your guy thinks that he can just overrule with an executive order, it specifically says people born therein are citizens. And then if you look throughout the document, the Constitution, it uses the word persons. See, it's made a very clear distinction between citizen and persons.
And the 14th Amendment,
if you go back and look at, for example, things that were written at the Constitutional Convention, or things written by the founders, that was a very deliberate choice.
Even the 14th Amendment, which came up after the Civil War, right? The 14th Amendment is a deliberative process that took almost 30 years before they finally figured out. It started with Andrew Jackson post-Civil War, and it ended because of immigration. It was literally immigration that led to the 14th Amendment. It was specific to Italian, Irish, and Chinese immigrants in the second half of the 19th century. And they were, and that the same issue that we're dealing with today, undocumented folks, people brought over here for work, that was happening then. This is not a new problem. This is a a problem that's existed, and they made the 14th Amendment on purpose because this kind of thing was happening. People were being killed, people were being disappeared. They were just not receiving the same treatment that we expect everybody else. So it really, you believe Trump? Trump said he's made mistakes, Fred. If you believe Trump, he's telling you they've made mistakes on this immigration thing. He said it himself on Fox News too. Because I feel like if Trump says it on some other platform, Tom, they don't believe him as much.
No,
but if he said it on Fox News,
fake news,
then they're going to believe him on Fox News, right? So on Fox News,
if Fox News says it, or if the DOJ report.
Fred. You're literally just making stuff up right now. So you're just completely wrong. It's cool. Still bring me some more Fig Newtons.
Yeah, I mean, the stuff that you make up in your head does not make it facts.
That's true. By the way, Tom, real quick, this is not a Republican-Democrat issue because to me, the Biden administration failed miserably in this department for years. They really did. It was a terrible, terrible situation. They did not know what they were doing, and they really, truly made terrible, terrible mistakes. They really did. They made a bunch of terrible mistakes. And over the last 18 months of the Biden administration, they decided to get tough on immigration, right? And they were going to enforce things, and they did. So a lot of these processes, partially run by Tom Homan, current Department of Homeland Security guy, started under the Biden administration. So the Democrats don't get off the hook. No one's saying that. This isn't a Republican-Democrat issue. The issue is that immigration into the United States since the 1980s has been a hodgepodge of mismatched laws, massive backlog, and underutilized things that have led to all these confusing things. Someone asked me earlier today, Tom, in response to my article about my family. So there's more than 40 people in my family that came here undocumented in the 1960s and 1970s.
Well, that late, I was to say, but like for much of the country's history, there was no undocumented. You just showed up and you got in. That's it.
Yeah. You just showed up and got in. So the issue with them is, so there's actually people. Yeah, he was Obama's guy. He was. That's what I'm trying to say. I've been trying to say this whole time. So the thing that really is striking, Tom, is that there are several people in my family right now that are not documented that happen to be Irish. No one's knocking at their door.
Nope.
But they can't. But
though. They just haven't caught them yet.
They just haven't caught them yet.
Never mind that they're letting in people from South Africa. They just ripped open the quota for South Africa.
So the issue that we're dealing with is if you go back to the amnesty in 1987 from President Reagan, right? So you have to understand history and political context. The Reagan administration was in the middle of one of the worst scandals ever, the Iran-Contra arms scandal. And in response to that, Reagan was pushed into doing an amnesty deal that he didn't want to do by Tip O'Neill here in Massachusetts. So there's like a lot of cool context related to that thing. But if you go back and look at the amnesty, it wasn't blanket amnesty. It was like from certain countries, and it was dependent on what time you came in. And so part of my actual family was allowed stay in the country under the amnesty laws. But because they didn't make a universal amnesty, and they never have, we are still dealing with the issues of people punting this issue. It's always kick it forward, let the next person deal with it, kick it forward, let the next person deal with it. But that's not even the big problem anymore. When did it become fun to be cruel? Like we're going to just do it with this like abject military approach, and everybody's going to be treated like a gangster, right? Like that. So everybody's in the gangs. Anybody's tattoos immediately make them MS-13, right? That's the big thing now, right? Everybody's an MS-13. By the way, I don't know if people realize this, but if you're from El Salvador, you couldn't be an MS-13 because MS-13 has issues with El Salvadorians, right? Which is why a lot of El Salvadorians come here on the asylum program, running away from trying to be killed by MS-13. So there's racial things within that organization that make it very unlikely someone from El Salvador is. That's why the president of El Salvador is locking them all up, because they're literally in that country a terrorist organization. So like there's so much context to here, and you just have to listen and think about it. But we're watching, Tom, live the stupidity of regular people here in Worcester who are completely uninformed, and their gut reaction is to just accept whatever the government says, even though last year we were told that everything the government said is bad. So
Yep.
we just swapped out one government for the other. Is that it? And now they're honest. Now they're
Well,
truthful.
and there's a bigger point to make, which people really don't like, about what drives immigration, what drives migrants to move north specifically from South America. The Northern Triangle countries, it's El Salvador, Guatemala, and Honduras are the Northern Triangle countries
right.
in South America. It's been several years now that's where most of people, at least from South Africa, are coming through Mexico to the U.S.
Yeah.
And if you look at the history of the Monroe Doctrine in those countries specifically, the Monroe Doctrine is a very old presidential doctrine that said that basically the United States shall control the Western Hemisphere.
Yeah.
Then a message to European countries and whomever: don't cross the meridian line. Stay on your side of the globe. We'll handle this side. All three of those countries, El Salvador, Guatemala, Honduras, between the Banana Wars were 1900 something, through the start of the 20th century, through even present up until the Obama administration, all three of those countries had been overthrown. Their governments, at times elected, not all of them, were overthrown by either CIA or military support from the United States as part of it, our version of colonialism. Mostly, generalizing, there's of course nuance to every one of those situations, but generally in the interest of corporate power. That is where the Banana Republic comes from, is the figurehead government in Guatemala, I believe it was. Guatemala was because the U.S. Fruit Company, I think it was a fruit company. I think it was the U.S. Fruit Company, owned more land in the country than the government.
Yeah,
and it ran the whole country. And then when somebody came to power, I think in that case was elected, they pushed back on that. The U.S. government went, well, we can't have that. So understand that I think it was El Salvador. One of the times that U.S. interests were at least highly involved in overthrowing that country, it slipped into a civil war that lasted 40 years. It hasn't been a formed country yet today, as long as it was at civil war.
That's right. And Bukele, the guy who's the current president, was our choice. He was our choice. We installed this guy and helped him to get to where he is. And part of what it is, that supermax prison that they have down there, was funded by an American company called Core Civic, which, if you want to get into the history of private prisons in the United States, go ahead and take yourself a deep dive down the history of Core Civic. Yeah, Sarah, these are things that, they're not taught about in high school or college. These are things where you have to actually kind of go down the line. But there's a series of great books, but one that Tom mentioned called The Banana Wars. And if you ever want to, have fun in a book, go read that book and see some of the amazing things that the United States was a part of. We led to a lot of those things. El Salvador, again, people have this assumption about Hispanic people too. This is also born in racism, is that like all Hispanics are the same, and they just it's such an ignorant thing to say, because then the history of it is lost, right? A lot of these countries were formed at different times, and particularly El Salvador. El Salvador is a heavily indigenous area, right? And the Spanish had a hard time getting in there. Now they ended up, having governments and stuff like that, but there's still been this tension that really has existed since the 1400s, Tom, right? When these folks didn't want to be ruled by the Spanish.
Yeah.
So we're still dealing with after effects of terrible decision making by European countries for centuries, and they're coming coming back to us today. But if you really think about it and do your own research, and by do your own research, I mean go to school. Don't just like Google it, because this week we have to get hit with AI searches all week long. People responding to Tom and I with these with whatever Google search pops up in the moment, which might be wrong, guys. And it says it on there. It says AI might be wrong. So
Yeah,
your
so,
AI
and
search.
just you know,
Oh.
so on all three of those countries, and that was the United Fruit Company, not the U.S. Fruit Company.
Yeah, United Fruit.
But the wiki articles on those three countries in this section are pretty good. I mean, so no, you shouldn't trust Wikipedia as an empirical source, but what you can do is look at the citations it has and read the links. That is often a good way to find, you know, more credible data than Wikipedia is if it's sourced well and you're getting to sources that make sense and isn't like, what is this? This is some college kid's paper from like, you know, an undergraduate paper from somewhere in wherever. You know, judge the quality of the sources it uses and look at those sources. That is a good way to make Wikipedia kind of useful. Yeah, so I mean, the last time was Honduras, 2011, I believe, was, you know, the United States decided that leader wasn't their leader anymore, essentially. And there was a coup and they were gone. So, I mean, the results haven't been nearly as devastating as, say, in El Salvador in the early 20th century, where they slipped into civil war for, again, decades. But, you know, so there's a role here that America has played in making the situation in South America worse. And it's, you know, it's a very, very long legacy of doing so. That doesn't mean that, you know, the country can't regulate its own immigration or whatever it might be. But understand that part of these problems are of our own making. True. That doesn't mean that there hasn't been bad governments in South America and whatever. You know, there's a lot of blame to go around. But some of these problems are countries that are failed states, and the United States played a role in that. So that's causing migration isn't, you know, people flee from failed states because there's typically very little order. That doesn't make it all our fault. This isn't a blame America rant. It's just the facts. And we still don't have a foreign policy that tries to actually encourage development and do anything real in these countries, because we're still in this very polarized, if they're winning, we're losing thing. This is a great example how, you know, that everything isn't if they win, we lose, or vice versa. Because this should have been a long time ago a win for everybody.
Interestingly enough, if you want to connect some of the dots, by the way, I sent you the image of the book, so you have if you want to tell the people the author. In that period of time, which is like the late 1800s to the, you know, like basically World War I, you know, the Depression era, pre-World War II, was also the time when tariffs as an economic policy were the most applied, right? In our recent American history, this is kind of a you know, not something that hasn't happened before, but it's kind of uncommon, and it was related to this kind of stuff. We were losing, the balance sheet wasn't the same on either side, and so then tariffs started being applied. And often when tariffs were applied, military intervention happens because some countries are so single you know, product or single you know, industry heavy that tariffs can destroy their economy very, very fast. And this happened to some of the banana republics when tariffs were imposed. When United Fruit wanted to punish one of the countries, they would tell whoever was in power in the United States, all right, tariff this country, and we're gonna have all the bananas come out of country, you know, A, whatever that was. Yep. And they literally ran foreign policy for the United States in that area for 20 or 30 years so they could force these countries to do what they wanted, while United Fruit became one of the biggest conglomerates of all time. And it carries on to this day. There are still corporations, massive companies in the world who made some of their wealth from some of these military political interventions that were just really misled and misguided. And in some cases, maybe they were just intentionally evil, Tom. I don't know. I mean, I don't want to judge people that are already dead. But I look back in history and I can say, yeah, you were murdering people over bananas. Probably a bad thing.
Yeah,
You know what I mean?
So I kind of got dragged into a history lesson, which I don't know, annoys some people. But I just that's and yeah, some of that was 100 years ago. But when it plunges a country into when the result of that is a country goes into civil war for multiple decades. It was 43 years or something. El Salvador, I believe it was it civil war? Was it effectually at civil war? I mean, that takes generations to the damage to be repaired, right? Even if you get to a point of peace, which they have, it still takes generations to repair all of damage to just loss of education for kids. You've lost a whole generation of workers, right? And the education level that they can get to because everything's disrupted by war. So
then that timeline though is important, right? Because you're saying about 40 years, right? So Reagan does his amnesty thing in 1987. If you understand that law that Congress agreed to, it was for everybody in the country at that time. Okay. At the same time, Reagan and the Contra stuff was going on in Central and South America. And so a lot of those countries were destabilized post Reagan. So Reagan does the amnesty, right? These countries become destabilized, 1988 into the middle of the 1990s and even on to today, like Tom said, and people started running away from there. So an entire generation of people left those countries in the late 80s, early 90s. Those are the parents of the dreamers, right? Those are literally the people in our country right now who have lived in our country for 30 or 40 years, who left war that we caused. We caused the wars. They left their countries then. They came here. Yep, they were undocumented. Yep, they crossed the border. Yep, all those things are true. Sure, 100%. But we caused it. We caused the harm. Now they're here. And those are the people that the Trump administration is heavily, heavily targeting. And those folks are here because of us. They don't have any connection to those nations anymore. They've been here for 30 or 40 or 50 years. In my article, I have worked with El Salvadorians over the past 6 years to help them access embassy resources. All right. So, because it's a really difficult process once you're here and you've been here to apply for asylum. It's much easier. The remain in Mexico policy is actually somewhat easier to do. So if you apply from Mexico, it's a little bit easier to go through the asylum process. But when you're already here, there is a process that charges you with a crime. Violation of the border. So you have to admit that first, and then there's a process. Now, up until the Trump administration, it was not handled in this like you're the worst person ever tone, right? That's really the major difference. So I've helped several people become naturalized citizens, and I watched the process, Tom. These caseworkers, they have thousands of cases that they're processing. These immigration courts, when Trump says that it would take years and years and years, he's not wrong, because the immigration courts are swamped, because it's not just El Salvador. It's, like you said, it's Honduras, it's Nicaragua, it's Mexico, it's Cuba, it's the Dominican Republic, it's Haiti, which has been massively destroyed by all kinds of American companies doing terrible things down there, right? These are right. Yeah, that's not wrong. These countries are destabilized in many ways, not like what we here have in the United States. The protests that we saw just on Thursday in some of those nations would have ended in significant lethal violence. That's not necessarily a common thing in the United States. So that's what I mean when there's destabilized countries. It's very difficult to compare our lives to how people are living in some of those other places. So we caused the problem. They came here, and now we're going to blame them for our problems here. It just makes no sense.
Yeah, and the other thing I think is, I actually don't know if this may have changed after COVID. I haven't seen a study or the numbers on it. But it was mid 2000s when the estimate was that the number of people that were overstaying visas, in other words, they came into the country legally, for a visa for whatever period of time, and they just stayed unended, that was actually the most, that was where the highest volume of people were now coming from that were getting into the country and becoming undocumented. Now that, there was, and people, I think there's been a lot of political games played with what the cause of the big bump after COVID is. It was because it was essentially a backlog. I mean, people didn't want to stop leaving these countries that were falling apart, and especially during COVID, some countries dealt with it better than others. So, once all the travel restrictions were released, there was this backlog of people that started migrating, and it hasn't really caught up yet, it would seem, because the numbers are, significantly skewed. There's a whole range of factors, right? So it's hard to isolate which kind of variable is pushing what. But I mean, that's certainly a factor too, right? Is one day we shut, everywhere shut their borders down basically, and then one day they all opened back up. Well, the same thing that were pushing people out of those countries, still existed, right? And probably were more acute during COVID.
Sure. And now, and so then you get into like the deep conspiracy theories. So people are like, hey, there's in these groups of people, there's Chinese people, and there's people from Africa, and they're Muslim, or originating countries. And there's this idea that there's like this fifth column kind of secret group element that are sneaking in with some of the Hispanic people. I don't know about you, Tom, but I'm at least culturally aware enough that someone who happens to be of Chinese origin looks very different than someone who is El Salvadorian. And so I find that hard to believe that is being something that, there's like they're sneaking in this way. So that really, again, seems to be born out of racism, this concept and understanding that if they don't look like me, then they must be somehow connected to this other thing, and all these amorphous ideas that just they never settle on anything. They're just kind of out there like bad. But then when you really look into it, the COVID thing makes sense. Also, the two massive funding bills, one that was proposed, and we know that John likes his oh man. So the I don't know who that is, but that's funny. So the two spending bills, one that was proposed under the Trump administration, and then the one that came under the Biden administration just right afterwards. These two really large funding bills. Part of their funding, if you go look at the law, was to take a lot of the paperwork stuff and get it online, because all of a sudden we were in a digital world, right? Zoom became a massive company, all these online schools, hybrid work. So they had to get away from paperwork at that time, right? So they were doing a lot of stuff electronically. If you remember the money, did you get your money? Did you get your check for $1,400, Tom? Did you have to fill out a piece of paper to get that check?
I don't remember. No.
Did it come to your bank account? It came to your bank account for the most part. Because what they did was they used the IRS database and they just sent it to the last known bank account that you had. In fact, during the Biden administration, there was a ton of prosecutions because there were a bunch of remittances to bank accounts that didn't exist anymore, right? And some of that money just disappeared. That's the first money the Republicans talked about clawing back. Like, where did that money go? So these are things that happen at the same time. All of these things are happening at scale. So we're not talking about a couple. We're talking about millions and millions of incidents. So then, yeah, it looks massive when all of a sudden 10 million people's records were shifted from paper to digital, and no one knows where they came from. Yeah. But they've been here the whole time. Right. They've been here for 30 years, folks. It's not something that just came the other day. And so just the illogical response is this heavily evil, I'm going to treat them like garbage. But the thing is, it's our own policies that have led to the situation as is. And now we're going to put a guy like Tom Homan. And yeah, maybe we've made a mistake, Tom, by calling George W. Bush a Nazi and by calling Trump a Nazi. But let me tell you, if we're going to call anybody that, it's got to be this guy, Tom Homan.
Not call anybody that is stupid.
Well, I'm just saying the
cruelty. But yeah, no, he's a bad human being.
Just like we're gonna kick some butt, like you're fighting a war. The tonality from Stephen Miller that they're invaders, that there's an invasion
now,
going
that guy,
on.
I mean, I'm not really big on using that word, but I mean that guy is
but that's what I mean. Where
I
are
just
they
want to
coming
say
up
about
with
this.
this stuff?
One, people always say, well, terrorists sneaking in. Well, the 9/11 terrorists all came in legally. That was actually part of the point. If you read, things that Bin Laden said after the attacks. And two, I just want to bring this back to the police department for a second. The beer garden, which I talk about frequently, the beer garden incident, the individual that was charged with crimes he never committed, Chris Ayala Melendez. He actually never said this publicly. I was at an event that he said this. He said it was the first time he had said it publicly. He was a dreamer. And if he was convicted of those crimes that he was accused of by a police officer before knowing that there was the surveillance tape that I think we've all seen, we've shown it here, he would probably be out now and be in a country that he doesn't remember ever being in.
Right.
Because he would have been deported. Almost certainly would have been deported.
That's a lot of the folks that we seem to be are getting caught up. I mean, it looks like they ran out of gang members pretty quickly. But I really just want to say, has everybody that watches, and we got hundreds and hundreds of people who watch now, which we're very grateful and we're excited about at This Week in Worcester, the engagement that we're getting. So thank you for watching. Does anybody remember the picture of all the people that were sent in these planes overnight, right? Men on the floor in their underwear, with no shirt on, head shaved, and they're all cuffed back and forth to each other on the floor. Is that what we're looking for? That they're just going to be buried forever? And is there no chance of redemption if you happen to be a gang member, like ever? Because I have to tell you this again. This goes back to my own personal story. I was not a good dude. I did bad things that put me in bad situations and definitely meant that I had to, I had consequences that I had to face in my life. And so if I was stuck in a fortress for the rest of my life, right?
My comment, sorry.
I never would have got a chance. And I think that at least I've had the chance to turn things around. And I wonder, did none of those men or women have the right or the chance to turn things around? I mean, that's our response is we're just, nope, unilaterally get them out and put them in a supermax prison that they'll never get out of forever because they were part of a gang. How many of those people that were in the gang were kids of gang leaders? Right? Are those kids ruined forever, Tom? Is that what we're saying? I just don't understand.
I mean, it was just an allegation that wasn't even true of a teenager who was allegedly the daughter of somebody who killed a cop. It was wrong, but they wanted to hold that against the daughter. Some people in the city. So, the whole thing was so stupid that they didn't even have the right person. This young girl was not even related to that person, but had a similar name. So I guess she should be ostracized because of her alleged father wasn't really her father, but in this allegation that was made, her father was, a cop killer. What's that have to do with her?
No, and the two guys, by the way, who were the primary drivers of that accusation, they're allowed to be pretty prominent public figures here in the city of Worcester. They're listened to. People they're considered to be leaders, even though they both had to apologize for the thing. But again, they apologized for it, and then it's just buried in history. But and she was a minor. That is 100% true. She was a minor at the time. Her family was threatened, and that police officer is still working for the Worcester Police Department right now, and has never really had to do anything public. I guess he apologized to the family in private.
He did absolutely apologize. That's a fact.
Yeah. But again, what kind of apology is that when since then the same tonality, the same attitude that he expressed in that situation is how he operates publicly? How to me, apologies are attached to changing your life. When you say sorry, attached to sorry is different behavior. It's not just sorry and then you do it again, right? I mean, this is again, I studied domestic abuse. My mom was a survivor of domestic abuse. And so I took some time, probably about 9 months, to do a series of classes on domestic abuse. And one of the primary operating things about domestic abusers are they will say sorry profusely. I'm so sorry. I'll never do it again. I'm so sorry. I'll never do it again. And then they do it again. And they do it again. And they do it again. Because they're not really sorry. they just are saying sorry enough to maintain the control over the other individual. This is a common component of narcissism. So you say sorry and you cry and you give all these opportunities for the person to look at you in a vulnerable way, and then as soon as you feel like you've gotten power back, you just reassert the same abusive behavior. This is a common thing. These are known scientific facts about abusers. In this case, that's what we have in these public officials. They apologize, I'm sorry, and then they go right back to doing exactly what they've been doing. There's no change in behavior.
I want to bring it back to Thursday if we could, because we're as we do, we get a little off the beat path. Kind of a political take. I mean, what happened was awful, and I'm not trying to, politicize it, but I think that, well, there was the DOJ report, and obviously the city manager was out 2 hours before it through his attorney, 3 hours before it, already complaining about it, and we've just heard like 6 months of whining since, really.
Yeah.
And like 10 minutes dedicated to what's right in the report. That was just recently, and now we kicked that report forward because the next 3 meetings for city council, and there's weeks off in between. I think 2 weeks off in those 3 weeks, 3 meetings. We're now kicking that into July before we can actually get anything in writing that says we actually agree with anything. So DOJ report drops, Batista, the city manager, all about defending the police department. He doesn't say how to come out of his mouth, but I mean, it's very clear. I think it's very clear now that, the chief isn't saying all he would if it weren't for what's coming down the chain at him. I think you can watch the meetings and see their interaction when Chief Saucier is answering questions. You can even see it on the TV broadcast. That's actually when I noticed it. You can just see how they're interacting, and you can kind of see how Eric's the city manager Batista is trying to guide him into where he can and where he wants him to go and where he not wants him to go. But then there was this. Now, the city manager said that directly supporting immigration law, that is a federal issue. There's a state law that prohibits it for local and state. So state police can't support immigration law either by law or in enforcement of immigration law. And the city manager said this publicly, that is also his policy, right? Not that matters because it's a law, but he said it. And I know they're going to disagree with this, till the end of time. But I think, in my view, it's pretty clear that the Worcester Police Department did exactly that. They showed up and supported the operation that ICE was running. When they're clearing the road to get those guys out of there, that's support. I'm sorry. Especially when you didn't verify who these people are, and they've basically snatched somebody off the ground, off the street. And the city manager laid down again.
Yeah.
This is probably controversial take, and I'm not saying he's going to be out of the job. He'll keep that job probably for many more years if he wants it. But it's effectively over. This is now, we are now reaching we are on the other side of the mountaintop. They now twice he's had the opportunity to say, I'm the boss, and this is how this is going to go. And both times he declined. The police unions are in charge of the city. He is not, and he's apparently coalescing to that.
Even though
it's over.
When he said, when he was ready to make Chief Saucier a permanent chief, he made this statement in the city council hearing meeting that when he announced it, right, where he said when they all everybody congratulated each other on this historic appointment, right, of this guy. He made this statement of when he interviewed him, he knew. Right. If you go back to the Paul Saucier's inauguration, the same thing. The city manager repeated this story, this concept. So he took credit for the interview process related to it, and so he asserted some kind of nominal control or statement that, like, I'm in charge and I'm actually the one making these decisions. And then so it sounds great, right? It sounds awesome. Right, that we have a city manager who's getting involved with the police department. I've moved the chief and the deputy chiefs out of civil service, which, by the way, we agree with here at This Week in Worcester 100%. We wish the whole department was out of civil service, but we got at least we got the chief in that position. But at the same time, you can't take credit for something and then in the immediate aftermath of taking credit for that, when you're faced with your first tests repeatedly since December, fail to rise to the occasion, fail to step up and say, we're going to deal with this. It's one thing to say the report offends us and we shouldn't, we should all take it seriously. It's another thing to have a lawyer undermine that at the exact same moment. It's one thing to say we're going to look at these things and we were already doing these things, right? We're already changing those things. And then at the same time, the first incident related to ICE participation coming up, they immediately don't do the right thing. You can't say things and not do things. I want to see where your feet are going, not what your words or the lips are moving. You need to match your actions to your words. And what we've seen in the city of Worcester is a clear dichotomy between what people say and what people do. And that's where we're at with the city manager. That's where we're at with the mayor and the majority on the city council. They just don't do what they say they're going to do. They just don't. They just don't. That's the whole point, Fred. That's what literally I just said. So you didn't listen to anything.
He's not police commissioner because we don't have one of those. He's by law, he's chief conservator of the police, which is every executive, in cities that make sense, they have mayors. We have a city manager, but the executive is the chief conservator of the police. And that really just means the police chief reports to him, and that's the top dog. Two things I missed that I wanted to get back to. Why does your name have to be Worcester MAGA? That makes it have to come out of my mouth. He said that when we were talking about, South American foreign policy, essentially, that was, both parties, and that's 1,050,000,000% true. And then Sarah Moore asked if we thought the country's being destabilized. I mean, compared to other countries that have experienced destabilization, no. Is there economic stuff going on with tariffs and all of that? Yeah, I would call it destabilization, though.
Yeah, so I would look at it like this. Sarah, the Super Bowl next year has already been scheduled, and they're selling and they're booking sponsors. So to me, if you look forward at like major events that are already scheduled, I find it hard to believe that those major corporations don't know some of the things and decisions that are going to be made. And it's not a conspiracy theory. It's just part of what happens at our country at scale. We see that in the city of Worcester. They make decisions behind closed doors. They let us know about it afterwards. And then we have to deal with the consequence of those decisions. Don't think that the same process doesn't happen at the federal level all the time, right? So yeah, it seems destable because this guy is the way he is. But this guy is very much a front for an entire thought process that really is the same, whether it's Democrat or Republican, which is we make the decisions and we let the people deal with the fallout afterwards. And we don't really care about what other people think as long as we make our money. So yeah, some corporations that weren't making so much money when Biden was president now are probably making more under Trump because, he favors those groups over others. But it's just billionaires transferring billions back and forth. That's really what it really comes down to. So, I don't know if it's destabilized in the sense that it's still, a corporate capitalist economy where corporations kind of always win out in the end, including the two massive corporations who run our country, the Democratic National Party and the Republican National Party.
Yeah, I mean, this is long ago stop being capitalism. This is state capitalism, state-directed capitalism. To call it fascism is crazy. It's not, at least in an economic. I'm speaking strictly in an economic sense, not fascist economy. But it's very much state capitalism, state-directed, markets, right? There's still a market system, but it's state-directed heavily.
Yeah.
I did want to get to now. I've been very calm.
Have you been watching the Bitcoin stuff? Speaking real quick.
No, what?
So the Bitcoin stuff. So all the Trump-related subsidies have been buying up Bitcoin in the dips, all of a sudden out of nowhere. And so then the guy who's their monetary director there, and then the dude that they want eventually to take over for the guy who's the current chair of the Fed. So Scott Bessent, and then I forget the other guy's name. They're making statements that are directly affecting those markets related to a digital currency. So Trump and Trump-related people are buying these dips, and then they're profiting off it, happening in live time, folks. So they're making policy decisions that are related to the regulations for digital currency, which we all know that's kind of where everybody wants us to go because it saves them money, right? So you can actually see it happen. This and by the way, the Democrats did the same thing. They benefit who they want to benefit, depending on who's in charge. But yeah, this happens live, and I think they want it to continue this way because whoever's in charge wants their people, their buddies, to get the money.
Let's move on to yes, it is market manipulation. It happens every day.
Yeah.
Let's move on to the dear president of the Patrolmen's Union was called for an ethics investigation of
this guy,
City Councilor Patel Hajia. As has been well reported up to USA Today, apparently, Consul Hajia was at the scene on Thursday when, at the time, these alleged federal agents, because they refused to identify themselves, were attempting to, I've been calling it, seize this human being. And Mr. Thomas C. Duffy II has called for that counselor to be for an ethics investigation. I don't know where that investigation is supposed to come from, because the city council made it very clear earlier this year that it's not going to investigate itself at all. But nonetheless, I don't really want this fight, but if when one has the audacity to challenge somebody else's ethics, starts to make sense to talk about let's take a look at who's saying this. Mr. Duffy has, and it's the most I've personally seen. I have 100 and some of these officer information cards just over the years. Different people I've asked for. It's just a summary of the whatever violation of policy they've been charged with and the disposition, which almost all of them are either unfounded or clear. And I forget what the word is they use, but cleared. Cleared is one of the words they use. His is the only one I've seen that goes on for 3 pages. This man, since throughout his career, has been alleged to have used unreasonable force 17 times. Sometimes twice in the same case.
But all
a whole bunch of allegations. And then, of course, the next thing that anybody that would support him would say was, well, he's not being found responsible for any of those. But the BOPS unit doesn't find people responsible for stuff, even when it's on tape, even when they clear the subject of the investigation is clearly lying. So, see, this is the problem that they've now worked themselves into, is they've not found anybody responsible for anything for so long that you can't judge, you can't give any credibility to somebody not being found not responsible for something, because when people are clearly found responsible for something, nothing happened. Mr. Duffy, I think he's on the gang unit now. Is that correct, John? He's gang unit.
That's my understanding.
Yeah, from what I understand, which is, look, I'm not saying that's that's not a cushy position inside the police department, but this person this weekend also can confirm that Mr. Duffy's also on the Brady list. The Brady list is, according to multiple sources, the Brady list is a list of police officers that DAs have this list all over the country. And it's a list of police officers within their jurisdiction that they won't put on the stand because they're known liars. They've been known to lie on incident reports, which is effectively trying to put somebody in jail for something they didn't do, or manipulating the evidence in the case against somebody to try and put them in jail. So DAs, so they're known for lying on incident reports, lying in court, lying. They're so not credible that they can't testify in court. I don't know how you can be a cop and not be able to testify in court. Like, what happens if you write somebody? Who writes the incident report? If your name's on it, you're screwed. I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, doesn't it ruin the case? And just to confirm what Tom says. So we spoke with multiple sources, people close to this information, that you understand that there's a packet that it has to be given to a defense attorney whenever Mr. Duffy has signed a report related to a case that's being prosecuted, right? So that means that it's not just not testifying, it's that they have to tell the defense attorney that this officer, who is the head of the patrolman's union, right, and gives on a regular basis, gives statements to the media. The Worcester District Attorney's Office considers him unreliable to the point where they will not use reports that he wrote or allow him to testify in a case. Now, that doesn't mean he doesn't testify, because if you get called as a witness, you get called as a witness. That's it is what it is. But that means a defense attorney off the bat, if you're a guy who or a girl who's committed a significant and serious crime, and it happens to involve Mr. Duffy, it's likely that you will not maybe face the fullest extent of the law, because they're going to be more likely to, say, offer a plea deal or plead something down because he's related to it, because they think if they take it to trial, they'll lose. And Massachusetts prosecutors, by the way, have a unbelievable record of convictions. That's a completely another show and another topic that maybe Tom and I will cover in depth later on. But they generally don't take it to trial unless they know they have it. We're talking 95% success rate when they take someone to trial. And so this guy is in the 5% bracket that they fail. And so they just don't let him get involved in that kind of stuff. That is really bad for the city of Worcester, that one of our prominent officers is just considered unreliable and dishonest by the Worcester County District Attorney's Office. And then on top of it, I wanted to say this out loud. The people that I've spoken to are afraid to put their names to this. They went and got the information for Tom and I, but they're afraid to put their name. These are people who work for the district attorney's office, but they're afraid. What does that say about our city? That they won't come out and say it. This is the same thing we went through with the DOJ case. Tom and I talked to dozens and dozens of people for different parts of this case, and we weren't the only ones. People are afraid of our police department. That is a fact. They are afraid of our police department. They don't look to them as heroes or that they're going to be protected. There is a gross number of people in our city that literally fear our police department. And that's the facts. That's not liberal, that's not conservative, that's not Republican, that's not Democrat. That's how people feel.
So he's got more than everybody else. Fred says he doesn't believe anything that anybody says, but the police department is basically what he said. So he's got more than everybody else, and he's been cut loose on every one of them, and that's not suspicious. That the police department is paid out more than 24 lawsuits in the last 10 years, but hasn't found one officer responsible for using excessive force. Not one in a decade, but paid out 24+ lawsuits. You believe that if you want.
Yeah, we pay out the lawsuits, but nobody ever did anything
Nobody's
wrong.
responsible for it. So if you like paying extra taxes, there you go. You're doing it.
And then, by the way, again, this to Fred and to the folks that respond in this way, when you say that, you're saying Chief Sauce is a liar, because Chief Sauce admitted that there have been cases of excessive force. He admitted this just 2 weeks ago. He said it himself. So it goes. Are you calling him a liar, Fred? Ask yourself that question. Why did he say that? And then he said that he can't talk about it because he's not allowed to talk about disciplinary issues without the officer being present. There was this kind of vague, I can't get into that situation. But he also admitted.
Let me address that, because I followed up with the police department. And they on what do you actually like? Where does that come from? What's the law, or is it the collective bargaining? What's the deal? And the police department referred me to the law department, and the law department responded by pointing me to the law on executive session, when a public meeting like the city council can go to an executive session. But the law gives them the permissible issues for which they can meet an executive session. None of that is required.
Right. May go in. Yeah.
Yeah. So I'm not sure what that means. Maybe there's something else, and I don't know why they would give me incorrect. I mean, I put in a petition to ask the city council to have a public forum, and that was ruled as I was asking them to enact or enforce the law or something, So
Yeah.
I don't know what the hell's going on at the law department, but I just wish that when they lied to me, they would put a little effort into it. I would just like that much respect. If you're gonna lie, put a little effort in to make it believable.
And by the way,
I'm not
when we
saying
say
that they
that,
lied on this. That's just an inadequate answer. That's not the right answer.
and
So
I do want to say this. I think at the law department, Tom, like we've worked with some of the folks that aren't necessarily the head of the law department, and
they're wonderful people in the law department and all through city government.
they try to help us, but what happens is you have a policy and you have a kind of a tone that comes from the leadership.
Yep.
And the leadership has basically said, hey, we're not going to answer these questions, so do whatever you got to do to distract them, to push them off, to come up with some excuse. And that's really what's come out of it. And it's not just the current solicitor. It was the former solicitor as well, and we just don't get any answers because they just don't feel like answering it. And unless, of course, you discover the smoking gun. If you discover the smoking gun, right, then all of a sudden they'll come up with a PR way to approach it, and they'll have to admit it, right? And so that's really what's happening, though. Is I don't think that they realize, Tom, though, how much people are now talking to us and to others. There's only a matter of time at this point before someone comes up with something related to one of these cases, and it really, really turns into an ugly situation for our city and our city government, which is, by the way, we don't want that to happen. Tom and I have been asking for honesty and discourse now for years, and not just us, Bill Shaner, Brad Petterson at the Telegram and Gazette, Manny over at Manny J Media. Like, people have been asking for honesty in discourse from the police department and from the city administration for years, and they're just not getting it. They're just Mark Henderson at the 016.
If you think back to COVID, to their credit, so then City Manager Augustus and Mayor Petty were held a press conference every day for a while, and then a couple times a week, and then into the law. This city manager has been city manager now 3 years, if you include his interim term, and never took a question live from a member of the press. Never been in front of a microphone outside of his State of the City address, which is coming up again. I didn't say anything last year, really, so I don't imagine he's going to say anything this year. There was nothing new policy. At least it was very grandiose, the language he used, right? It was all very high level and no actual meat. So I mean, even to their credit, I'll give them credit. I went and did a piece on it. City Councilor Christian King, Councilor Louis Ojeda, and Councilor Tel Hajia were at YWCA, held a press conference on Friday about the incident on Thursday rather, and they took questions. It was refreshing. I didn't know that, I thought there was a bylaw or something. You couldn't do that.
Right.
I mean, nothing, the questions were fine, and there were a couple of the answers were, I just don't know, right? They were probably operational questions or whatever. But at least they took the question.
Yeah, take questions. What's wrong with that?
Yeah.
So this, by the way, I agree with your experience. I mean, so I executive produced Manny's show, and we've done, kind of a monthly show with the manager for almost 2 years since he became the city manager. And, my experience has been we're very limited in the questions that we're allowed to ask. And in the few times that Manny asked natural progression questions, the manager has clearly and openly bristled at answering those questions and has pushed back both there and then afterwards in dealing with, Tom Matthews, his media guy. We often will get, pushback on those things. And that's really difficult. So it's like, you can't ask a real question. And if you do ask a natural question that comes up in conversation, you're going to be limited with your access. Yeah. If we don't champion everything they do, then they limit our access. And listen, behind the scenes, I mean, we're asking for access all the time. I mean, we're trying to get information because we feel like we have an audience and a platform that wants the information. It's not like we're trying to do it because Tom and I aren't getting paid big bucks here to do this, folks. We're really doing this kind of on a volunteer basis. And so, that's, unless someone out in the audience wants to sponsor This Week in Worcester. And by the way, we will take your sponsorship money if you're down to do that. But what we're saying is we're not really we're not rolling in the dough here. Even the other community media things. I mean, Bill's built his thing up for like 6, 7, 8, 9 years, and he's just getting to a position where he can pay his own bills. And to his credit, he's worked his ass off to get that. I give him 100% credit. Manny, same thing. Tom, same thing. This is not a lucrative business, so it's not like we're doing something to try to like make it on their backs. We're literally just asking them like, hey, what's up with the chickens? And they fight us on the chickens.
Yeah,
it's like,
and what they do, I mean, like just like, and I'm only using this as an example. I'm not singling him out, but when the chief was at chief of police was at the public safety committee, I mean, when people ask questions, he picked and choose which ones he wanted to answer.
Yeah.
Right. If they don't, and I mean, this is again not just him. This is pretty common. They just put themselves in situations where they don't really have to answer any questions, unless they come from counsel. And, that's a delicate balancing act for a million reasons. So, I mean, I strongly believe that there's definitely a deep lack of authenticity coming from our public officials in this state. I mean, in this city. And if they were authentic a little bit, they'd be much better off because they're decent people. Even if you don't agree with their politics, which I mean, many I don't, right? But you talk to them one-on-one, they're good people, they're decent people. If you talk about anything but the things you disagree with them on, they're enjoyable people to talk to. And then I see them how they behave in public, and I just like, who is this person?
Yeah, I will say this: the mayor's press release, which was on Thursday, was okay. It expressed remorse for the situation that took place, and there was like, I thought it was a genuine thing from him. I think again it didn't go far enough to go after the root cause of the issue, and I think that they believe deep down inside, Tom, they truly believe that if they just are given enough time and enough like secrecy behind the closed doors, they can resolve all these issues. And what we're trying to say, and I think a lot of the community that watch our show, that watch Manny's show, that read Bill's articles, that listen to him and Chris's show, what you're seeing right now is that the too many windows have been thrown open at this point. Too much light is in for you to hide in the dark anymore. And so it might not happen this election cycle, but at some point there's going to be consequences. You can't hide stories like this forever. You just can't. And the more that people step up and be brave, like we saw with Councillor Hajiaj, you're going to have other people do the same. And the crazy part is that we're waiting on these men, these typical politicians to step up. And in the end, what we're seeing is women who have been through terrible situations. They're the ones leading the charge. That's what's happening literally live. Some of the DOJ stuff came from women on the fringes who were abused, who came forward bravely and literally stood inside the city council chambers. Tom and I were there and stood in the same room with people who abused them, and stood at that podium and said that they were hurt and they were abused and they were silenced. That's a real thing that we watched live. You can go see it on the city website. It's still there. That kind of thing is not like normal way of getting governance done, but they seem to be okay with that. They seem to think it'll just go away. But this kind of trauma and this kind of abusive, situations, it does not go away. I know this myself. You're always dealing with it until either you come to a complete point of healing, but then it could be triggered by anything, and that's the situation we're dealing with. And they're just not listening, Tom. They're just not listening to us. And
meanwhile,
I feel like they're getting what they want.
2 people were arrested on Thursday. And, one was obviously having a trauma response to her mother just getting snatched off the road. And if you watch the video, the other one did very little. Reacted to the screams of this teenager as they were being, we'll just say arrested. And barely came into contact, at least it looks by video, barely came into contact with a couple officers. And as soon as they were pushed away, did barely moved again, and certainly there's no evidence of resisting arrest. And yet when we see videos of officers running around like with chickens with their head cut off, just smashing anything that they can come in contact with, like they did in 2020 in response to some protesters on Main Street, and they were ripping phones out of people's hands and throwing them on the ground and stomping on them, or ordering a kid to leave the scene. He gets in his car and they yank him back out to arrest him. If I walk out of the city hall chamber and I take the phone out of a police officer's hand and throw it on the ground, stomp on it, guess what? I'm going to jail, and rightfully so.
Yeah, immediately.
Okay. And that's the way people like Thomas Duffy, violent, out of control people, they think because by virtue of them doing it, it should be legal. It's true cult of personality. It's sociopathy on a different level. So
I agree, Tom. I just, it doesn't make a lot of sense.
And just for the record, not everybody inside the police department believes that. It's hard to say that because God knows what will happen to you.
Well, and that's the thing. That's what we've been saying all along. I am for good cops.
Yep.
I'm not against cops. I'm for good cops. I'm just against bad cops that do bad things, because I believe that if you take a position of authority and prestige in our community, you should be held to a higher standard. That is my personal belief. And I know not everybody agrees with me about that, but if you do that, you should be held to a higher standard. And it goes right back to this incident that you saw on Thursday. A child was watching her mother be cuffed and thrown into a van, an unmarked van, by men who had refused to identify themselves, that were wearing masks, were dressed in military tactical gear, and she was distraught, which is a completely normal reaction. It's normal for a child to react that way. So yeah, she broke away from the people. She ran towards the car, and they decided that their response would be to fold her. That's the response of the police officers. They didn't think clearly the training defects that the chief has talked about in his conference. We watched it happen live, because those officers did not have any foresight, any reasonable thinking process to say, this is a teenager who is watching their mother being taken away from them. How can they not know how to react, right? It's just a really just terrible thing. And then, the accusations that they've made against Ashley Spring and against Councilor Haji are just nonsense. We all saw the video, and to be honest with you, Tom, if we didn't have all those people show up with all those phones and cell phones, I have no idea what would have happened to all those people. Because thank goodness everybody has a GoPro and a lens camera in their glasses, and their cell phones are out, because other than that, we would have just had to go with whatever statement the police decided to make, and they still did it anyways. They still decided to lie about it anyways, despite the fact that we watched the videos live. This was happening live, and we watched it in real time. People being assaulted, children being harmed, women trying their best to stand with other women in a very traumatic situation and ask reasonable questions. Where's the warrant? Who are you? Can you identify yourself? Can you tell us what's going on? And nothing but resistance. And then Worcester police officers on camera, on audio, screaming into the crowd, calling people of Worcester scumbags, calling the people of Worcester criminals. We're going to arrest you. We're going to have you all thrown away. Threatening the teenage girl with separation, telling the aunt, hey, you better stay out of this or we're going to take your kids away from you. That's on camera and on video. These are all documented situations. None of that is correct police work. So if they want to tell us, hey, we have procedures and why is that officer threatening the aunt who's standing off the side, having taken the baby that they told her to do? They just said to her, hey, you need to not have the baby in the street. The young girl hands the baby to the aunt. The aunt stands on the sidewalk, and then the police officer threatens her for getting involved. How does that make any sense? Where is that in the training manual? Show me where that exists in the training manual. Show me where taking two hands and shoving Ashley Spring directly back is a correct use of force response when she was trying to intervene in the folding of a child. That's what was happening live. That double-fisted bump to shove her across the street. That's the training manual. That's the use of force pyramid. Where are they coming up with these things? And then when we ask a reasonable question, Tom, a reasonable question, they will say to you, "You don't understand. It's people are making the snap decisions. It's too hard to do it." But they came there with the intent to destroy the people of Worcester and support the unidentified federal agents. That is a fact of what our police department did.
I mean, look, and I'm trying to see things through that lens of like, what would a reasonable person do in the moment, not 20/20 hindsight. Like, I do think that that's important to try and keep in mind. But when, again, I will bring it up again because it is the most despicable thing I think anybody in law enforcement can do, is when you write things on a report that didn't happen and then send crimes to the district attorney based on your lies. That's a that's not a snap. That's not an in the moment decision. That's a premeditated attempt to try and coerce the government into kidnapping somebody for something they didn't do. That's what it is. It's the lowest of the low. It is the scummiest of the scum. And that's covered up too. They tell them that that's okay too.
And then the city manager affirms it. They charged the teenage girl, they charged her with reckless endangerment of a child, even though she followed the direct order of the police officer. She was given a direct order. You need to, this child is in, you shouldn't have the baby here. And she, on camera, we saw this. She took the baby. She gave the baby to her aunt. That happened. We all saw it. You can't hide it. It's 75 different angles, 14 different kinds of cameras, all kinds of different cell phones and GoPros and everything. We all watched it happen. We heard the command. We heard her respond to the command. That means the elements of the crime, reckless endangerment, are not engaged, and they still charged her with it.
Yep.
That is bullshit. It is a lie, and that officer should be suspended immediately for filing a false police report. But of course, in our state and in our city, Tom, they will never be held accountable for something we can see with our own eyes. I saw it. I watched it myself. I don't need to see the body camera footage. I can see the footage right now, and it's on 1,000 places. But Telemundo got the best shot. Literally, the cameraman for Telemundo is on the ground, while they are folding this young girl, suplexing her, and then folding her into a pretzel. We saw that live. You can't get rid of that, guys. That was on a broadcast camera. It is there forever. You can't get rid of those pieces of footage. And by the way, this week in Worcester, we pulled all those camera footage from everything we could. So we got it all. You can't hide it from us anymore. We have the evidence. We saw what we saw. She did give it back to the aunt again, Natalie. You got to go watch all the videos before you make comments like that. She did give it back. She followed the direct command of the officer when she was standing in front of the car. It is clear. It's on 15 different videos, and it was reported by Channel 5, Channel 7, and Telemundo. So again, it just boggles my mind that they stand on these things and then they charged her with it. It's bullshit, Tom. It's total bullshit.
Yep. And I mean, look, whether it's manipulating a police report or overcharging someone, how many times has this happened? Again, in a city that is median household income ranks 52nd of 57 cities in the state, or 59 cities in the state. What's the 52nd? And if you're somebody living at a median household income, or in a household at median, at the median, and you have a bunch of charges that are, at the very least embellished, and you go to court, what do? You cop a plea. Because you can't afford a private attorney, and you have a public defender. God bless the public defenders, but they're also holding, a billion cases. And you cop a plea. And how many of those people did time? Ruin their whole life over embellishment. And I'm being really nice about using the word.
Yeah, no, I mean, so we've talked. This is one of the things that's been like the focus of my life is the study on recidivism. Obviously, I spent some time in prison, and while I was in prison, I took up the study of recidivism. Recidivism is the rate by which people return to jail. So since the institution of widespread correctional facilities in the United States, crime has increased. And who's the population that crime has increased in? People who have already been to jail. right? So once you go to jail, here in Massachusetts, there's a 68% chance that you'll go back to jail within a year. There's actually a 90% chance you'll go back to jail within 3 years. So anybody who makes it past the 3-year mark is in that little small group of people that doesn't. If you go to jail 2 times in your life, the chances of you going back to jail are basically 100%. It's like 99.99999% because you've gone to jail and you spend time with people who just are not thinking correctly because they're in an institution that is designed to break them. And so those little societies, those fake little prison societies that they create, where they create these counter pressures between races, counter pressures between gangs, when they take information and they hand caseloads, right, to people. By the way, Tom Duffy, this is just like a known factor that he often sends paperwork in on his own informants. They get beat up in jail. They come out more hardened criminals. And then he uses them to get more information. This is like a common knowledge thing. He's not the only person who does it. But yeah, that's a practice that we see all over our country. So then a young kid, 16, 17 years old, gets locked up for possession of, I don't know, marijuana, because that was happening back in the day, even though now it's super legal now. He goes into jail and he learns from some guy who's really bitter and upset that he's in prison for something similar. He gets out and commits a violent act. Now, I'm not taking away from that person's violent act, right? They committed a violent act. But you have to deal with logically the mitigating circumstances that led them to making that decision. You've got to deal with it.
And really, all you hear from police people is just let us beat up people more.
Yeah. Well, so, I saw a response on your article about Nat Cosenza, right? So you've been writing this series on gaslighting and specifically on, false imprisonment and Nat Cosenza. And one of the responses in the comments was, he's not a good guy. So there is actually an element of people within the police and within the kind of like hardcore tough guy community, which is, well, he didn't go to jail for the things that he did, so we're okay with him going to jail for something he didn't do. That's their thinking process, Tom. They're like, yeah, he wasn't really truly innocent, so him burying 16 years. The statistics for officers who have admitted that they committed crimes when they were younger but didn't get caught and ended up being officers, the numbers are unbelievable. That's a national chief statistic, right? So the line between a police officer and someone who ends up in prison is really a thin line. It's a common personality trait actually that kind of exists, which leads to a lot of folks in the police department and the corrections union committing suicide. They have a very high suicide rate because they have a hard time dealing with the cognitive dissonance. They have to enforce these laws, but they know deep down inside that there is a clear and definitive dichotomy of thought and it doesn't make sense to them. And so to try to mitigate that, they're always compromising their own things that they see with their eyes. And when we say this, what I just said just now, what Tom is saying, it's not hard to follow, right? It's not hard to follow. I think that anybody can, but they think that you're too stupid to follow what we just said. And I don't think you are. I think that the people are smarter than them. And it's about time that we have a change from the just let us do it, we know better than you thought process to a more community-driven governance system.
Before we get out of here, because I promised we would never do in 2.5 hours again.
No 2.5 hours, no?
Last thing I want to talk about is as protesters marched on Friday, literally protesters are marching on Main Street and around and the surrounding area. The agenda for the Worcester City Council meeting is released. As it always is on Friday afternoon, late in the day Friday. But it just, the optics of protesters are marching while it's released. And we get from that agenda the news that the city manager has appointed 2 new people to the Human Rights Council, or Human Rights Commission. Now, the city manager is engaged in a 2-year-plus long news tightening around the Human Rights Commission, which is long been the only place where any sort of oversight of the police department happens.
Right.
And the city manager sought to restrict that, telling members of the commission, I think it was last year, that their work with the police department would be redundant because of the DOJ investigation. Well, in hindsight, now we see how they reacted to the DOJ investigation. And, you know, I mean, and I'm sorry, I don't believe anybody thought that that report was going to be good for the police department. They said it, but I just don't buy it. There was no way it was going to be anything but horrible, because the police department's been bad for a very long time, long before anybody that's there now was there, and long before anybody that was before them, the generation before them was there. Right? This has gone on 50, 60 years. From the 30s and 40s, this police department's been problematic. And you know, the more I dig at kind of the history of it, and I've got a long way to go, don't get me wrong, but the more I dig at it, you know, it's really a culture that has been passed along for a very long time. And you know, I mean, people are responsible for their own actions, but you know, from a sociological perspective, like, this is learned behavior. This is what they learn. Behaving like this is what they learn to do. And even if you come in to the department as, you know, you're young, you know, you just get out of college or whatever, and you go to the academy and you get on the police department, and you come in and you want to do everything right, and you're trying to do the right things, even though they're hard, and you look around and people that have been there 10 and 20 years are doing whatever the hell they want and nothing happens. That weighs on you. Why am I doing the hard thing? I don't have to, right? And it's not something that happens overnight, but it's you're literally taught to do what those of more experience will do, because they know nothing's going to happen to them. And so the manager's gone on nothing short of a crusade. Yeah, he's, in my view, violated the law, but we don't have enough people in council that care. Remember, council creates the laws. You know, he's clearly tried to restrict the Human Rights Commission from doing the things that are within its jurisdiction in the law. And he thinks that, you know, they have some wacky opinion that he can just tell them to do whatever he wants. And of course, they refuse to do that. And so he didn't appoint the chair and the vice chair. The chair, Ellen Shemitz, is a retired attorney. I don't know who else you would want at the front of that thing, who works incredibly hard and worked incredibly hard as chair of that commission. And Liz O'Callahan, who'd been on it since 2017, and again, worked very hard. And they were not reappointed. And then these appointments, Father Jonathan, I can't, do you know how to say his last name? I don't. Slavinkus. And the other appointee is Kerry Witterall. Witterall, I don't know much about, besides that the last city manager, Augustus, appointed her to an ARPA ad hoc committee on mental health, which was like, those ad hoc committees looked at grants and made grant decisions. And that turned out a bit controversial, but you know, I don't want to put that on this person. But Father Slavinkus, Father Jonathan, he is the pastor at St. Bernard's Catholic Church on Lincoln Street. Parishioners absolutely love him as a pastor. Well respected in that community amongst people that aren't his parishioners. You know, I've met him on multiple occasions. An absolutely wonderful man, and I mean that. I'm going to forget his name, and I apologize, but the young man was the student who who died after the one-chip challenge. I mean, he was by that family's side every second. He's a great community leader, a great human being. He's what do they call it? The chaplain. He's been the chaplain for the Worcester Police Department for over 6 years. He has a close personal relationship with Sergeant Anthony Petroni, who used until recently. Yes, Harris Willabuff. Thank you. I'm sorry that I forget his name. Petroni's was the vice president of the officers union until recently. He decided not to run again. You know, I've had exchanges of words with Sergeant Petroni. Other than that, you know, I don't know him very well. But I mean, you know, since the DOJ report, he's still promoting this conspiracy theory that it was all interns that did all the work. Yeah. Yep, they used interns on the project that has nothing to do with you. Do I like? this idea that they just get to audit the investigation. Does anybody else get the, if somebody you were investigating as a Worcester police officer, if somebody you were investigating came to you and started questioning you on how you did your investigation and blah, 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 you would tell them to pound sand. And that's what the DOJ should tell you. Shut up. It's ridiculous. It's absolutely ridiculous. But nonetheless, I mean, and even people that speak glowingly of Father Jonathan, you know, say, I mean, look, he's a pro-police guy. And it just does not seem like the right person to be doing police oversight. Again, wonderful man. I have nothing bad to say about him personally. But just the optics of he's been the chaplain of the police department for 6 years, and now he's on the Human Rights Commission, the only place that anybody in the city can look for anything that even resembles oversight of the police department. Like, he's trying. I don't know how to interpret this, but the city manager wants no oversight. He wants to deal with everything in-house. You know, we'll have Bops do the report. And if these annoying reporters figure out that there's a case, they can ask for the file, and it is what it is. But we're not, you know, going to be transparent. He loves to use the word transparency. He does none of it.
Yeah, it's total. So the thing about this that strikes me is that, you know, and again, when I get the chance to, I'm going to ask Father Jonathan this question. Father Jonathan has been a very prominent Worcester person for years and years and years.
For years and years.
And has never once expressed interest publicly in the Human Rights Commission. Not once. Never once. There's not a statement, not a moment, not a nothing. And so I want to know if he was recruited. I want to know if he was recruited because it looks like that he was. And the absolute abject, tone-deaf approach, again, of this city manager to put the current police chaplain and think that people aren't going to respond to that and say, this looks bad, because it looks bad. And now his insistence, since he's become the city manager, is that the Human Rights Commission has no ability to have oversight over the police department. In his opinion, when the DOJ report was going on, then once that stopped, they started to have dribs and drabs of things with the police chief meeting. And to Paul Saucier's credit, he met with the Human Rights Commission on a regular basis, and Ellen has said that he's been very cooperative. But when the potential for us to dig into these reports and find information is getting closer and closer and closer, that we're going to find out the things that are really true there, that maybe we're going to get closer, deeper to the reporting, that you make this shift right at this time, man, does it look really, really, really bad. And I just don't know how he can justify in his mind that this doesn't look terrible, except for one thing, Tom, and that is that the group of people that run the city just don't care how they're viewed by the people of Worcester. They think the people of Worcester are stupid in general, and they have no problem doing something like this. This is an abject slap in the face to the people of Worcester and to the folks that have worked hard on these issues for years. The fact that the DEI, the chief of the diversity office, Kevin Levancy, actually intervened in the meeting when they were going to vote on extending the chairmanship means it was planned. Tom, they planned to do this, and they intended to get rid of the president and the chair and the vice chair. There was a planned operation by the city government. Never before has anybody ever intervened in the voting process. Right? You know, never. No, but he is responsible to the people, even though he isn't elected. Everybody's responsible to the people, in my opinion. You know, but the optics of it are just terrible. They're just terrible.
I don't want to get into a whole analysis of who's who in the city council, but there's 2 to 4 members of the city council they're for anything the police department does.
Yeah.
Absolutely anything. And there's a 5th that's not far behind them. And so that means you only need 1 more. On every issue. And there's it works on both sides. There are now that there's only 10 that show up. 4 vote together often on important issues. There's a lot of 11-0 votes and votes that just get pushed through on procedural stuff. But on actual issues, it's basically a 6-4 split right now. Doesn't always work out that way, but often does. And there's no depravity from the police department that some of these counselors will not tolerate with a smile. They like it. They won't talk about it. They won't mention it. They won't talk about it, just like the rest of the city government. Bad stuff we won't talk about. Good stuff we'll talk about ad nauseum. And then we'll call ourselves transparent when we only talk about or release things that make us, make you try to paint the light on us that we want. Yeah. That's not transparency. That's politicizing everything. That is, how you believe people perceive you is far more important than the facts. That's it. And we've seen this again in the Cosenza case, where they don't care about the facts at all. At all. Right. They don't care if the police department officer manipulated and fabricated evidence. They don't care even a little at all. They have these officers that have lied on police reports and done all this, crazy stuff, filed charges for things that never happened. And is there any investigation of other cases by those people to see if this is a pattern that they've conducted? And more importantly, has it led to a false incarceration? They don't care. Why? How do we know that? Because they're not looking. If they cared, they'd look. Council could create an ordinance tomorrow that creates a committee or a commission or whatever. That's they create the laws, and the structure of government is in the law. They can create a committee tomorrow that does exactly that. They won't do it. Why? Because their owners at the police unions will tell them not to. It's that simple.
And by the way, I want to say that it's not just in the field of police. It's just anytime somebody offers an alternate suggestion to how to manage a situation, like we on the cable commission, we offered, we worked hard, and then we discovered that Charter Spectrum was lying blatantly to us. And not only that, stealing money from the city, stealing money from senior citizens, stealing money from the handicapped folks in the city. And when we discovered that information, it wasn't like we did like deep dive. We asked for records and they gave it to us at the last possible second. Up until that moment, Tom, I don't know that the commission was going to vote how they did with me to write the report to recommend denying the cable license, right? But they were probably intending to figure out a way to get a better deal, right? Let's just get a better deal, and then we'll be in better shape, and that's how we'll kind of go on with it. And the city manager had made himself very clear when he said that he didn't want any municipal cable, and he was intending to negotiate the deal no matter what. And so when we changed our minds, the immediate response was overtly negative because we were contradicting what he said. And even since then, he's expressed this personally to me, and so have many of the city councilors, that I've continued to push on this issue. And it's as innocuous as cable, and it is as serious as police. But the same behavior applies across the board, which is if you don't do it our way, we're going to bury you. You're a troublemaker. We're going to do everything we can to undermine what you say in public, and we're going to make you look as bad as possible. But what happens, Tom, when it goes wrong? What plan is there for absolute disaster? Because we live in a world where absolute disaster happens all the time. We live in this world. That's a real thing. I mean, it just happens all the time. So what are they going to do when something goes wrong? And obviously, if you followed along with me and Tom, you probably saw my testimony about 6-7 weeks ago when I found out that Spectrum had actually taken some of the money that they said they didn't have and invested in another town in Connecticut. So they kind of took money from our seniors and gave it to another town in Connecticut where they built a headquarters down there. And so
the city's fine with that, but if you disagree with them, though, you're the Antichrist.
Yeah, I'm against. I mean, just get hammered. And anytime we go in there, and then, when it's off the record, when it's like, when the TV cameras are off, all of a sudden they're our buddies and they're our friends and they're joking around with us, and there's all that kind of attitude. Meanwhile, all they do is talk shit about us behind our backs. And that's really how the whole city operates. And it's sad, and it's not everybody. It's a group of people who are concerting power into one small group that makes all the decisions. And that really is what we're trying to get at. That's not the way democracy or Republican kind of government, if this is a republic, was ever intended to be. It's supposed to be for the people, by the people, right? That's what we all have, learned growing up in school. We turned out that if you're a woman or if you're black, that doesn't count, right? So it's only apparently they only meant those founding fathers only meant white men who own land, but and that's those are the.
Well, let me take issue with one thing now.
Go ahead.
I don't necessarily mind, like, you're on the battlefield, if you will, right? You're doing politics, and I mean, yeah, it's a bit performative. I mean, everything's performative in the political system in this city, but yeah, it's a bit performative to take issue, and however you choose to express that you're taking issue with somebody. And yeah, when the cameras go off, it's different, but that's okay to me. Like, because we're now off the battlefield, right? We're not fighting for whatever it is where each side is fighting for, right?
Sure.
I mean, I recently said to, I'm not going to say who, but I said to a city councilor who I like very much. I enjoy talking to them. They're a nice human being. I told them straight out, I was like, look, if you're reelected, great. If you're not, you can blame me because I'm not going to vote for you. But even if you're not reelected, I'd still love to have coffee again with you, right? Because I like the person.
Yeah.
But their politics aren't for me, and that's okay. And they'll do an action with. I understand that, and I think that's the way it should be. So I don't know when especially you're on TV and you're doing politics, right? You're actually in the fight. Yeah, I move my arms and shit and look weird. But I'd rather be on good terms, like when we're outside the fight, than not.
So I don't mind being on good terms with people. I just have an issue with people who do radical evil stuff, and at some point I have to take a stand against that. And I'm not saying that the city councils are necessarily the ones doing that. I think that some of them might be, and so then my thing is eventually I got to let it go. Joe Petty has introduced me and Manny to multiple people as the two guys who made him lose the election to Robert Kennedy, right? Like I've been at functions, and he's like, "Hey, these two guys, they made me lose," and that's how he introduces us. It's kind of funny, right? And which is hilarious to me because as I've talked about it, I think Robin Kennedy won because Robin Kennedy did the hard work of walking the streets of the city of Worcester, particularly in District 4, which had not been done by a state Senate candidate in that position in a long, long time. And that wasn't nothing against former State Senator Chandler, who had a great campaign operation, but really District 4 has been left, kind of not touched for a long time, and it's just the facts of our city. District 4 is not considered a place where people spend a lot of political capital or energy, and I just think that's where she won the election. And Manny and I happened to be operating in that area very heavily at the time, so I'm still friendly with him, and I'm not. I've known him since I was 15 years old. I've known a lot of I've gone through a lot of things with the guy, and I do genuinely like him. Yep. I just think that at some point there has to be a change in thought and logic, and I think that Joe believes that he can fix everything. I think he does believe that. Behind the scenes, he can work it all out and eventually make it all feel good for everybody. But the fact of the matter is, at this point, it is an ultra negative city and an ultra negative political environment. And we're only in May. What happens in September this year after the primary?
So ugly.
It's going to be the worst thing we've ever seen. Press releases started last November.
Yep.
Right. So like people were attacking each other in the press last November. So we're into 5 months of people hating each other. And again, and to the city councils who regularly watch our show, to the chief of police, to all of you, I just want you to think about this. What if we find something? Because Tom and I are not going to stop.
No,
we're not. And so what if we already found that Duffy is on the Brady list. We found that. What if we find more? What else are you going to do? You can't hide everything. I mean, I guess you could pin some charges on me and get rid of me, but you can't get rid of Tom because he ain't breaking no laws. Right? So I'll write him letters from jail. So maybe you can get me buried. But I don't know that you can bury all of us. And it's not just me and Tom. There's a bunch of people now involved. You've really pissed off a lot of people by handling it in this way. So just think about that. And it's not a threat. It's just saying that people are not going to stop. You got kids now that are digging into journalism that have never done it before. Tom and I are going to have some kids come start writing for us soon too. This Week in Worcester is going to expand its coverage, not limit its coverage. We're going to have a much bigger footprint, more and more and more and more. And so, at some point, you have to get on the right side of history. Maria's going to give me canteen money so I get my ramen soups.
Yeah, I actually don't think this is really a credit to myself. They've pissed me off so much at this point that
you're never going to stop.
No,
you're never going to stop.
I think the key thing that they don't get is that you can't fix this behind closed doors. If you want that, they say they want to repair the relationship with the community, but they don't seem to want to do anything to do that.
Yeah, they don't want to make it because you got to say sorry, and that's hard. That's hard.
You're doing things that weren't. If you weren't playing this game of, we're doing everything that the report told us to do, but it has nothing to do with the report. We started that, apparently January 1st, 2023, the day after the period that they stopped, where they stopped looking, right? Like, it's all ridiculous. Like, what's so hard about? Yeah, it's really screwed up, and we're going to fix it. Yeah. And if you at least play some of that out in public, that it's not just performative, that is real. That's how you kind of begin a healing process. And that goes both ways, because don't tell me that, there's not people in the police department that, in general, the public all hates us and, they feel under attack. It's not about you, brother. It's not about you at all.
It's not against, it's just not against everybody. I'll say this real quick though, the data thing, let's focus on data. Like, we're going to do everything based on data. We're going to bring in these new programs. I don't care what tool you get. That tool does not change the underlying attitudes and thought processes. And that doesn't.
Right. I mean, you'll be able to get more data, but then how are you going to use that data? If you don't believe anything is real, that anything that anybody says about the police department is all fake news, then what's the data going to do? You're just going to find a way to use it to validate yourself.
Do you remember Joe Kerrigan?
Yeah.
When he was the manager of the Red Sox?
Yeah.
So he was the pitching coach, and then he became the manager. And they had basically in the last 25 years, by far the worst season that we've had in the last 25 years. When they fired him, they also fired every single coach that he had brought onto the staff and the trainers. And I always thought about that as they were like, dude, this is so bad. We're just going to clean house and start over.
Yep.
And then they started over. And then, they eventually got to a position where it was a different, different coaching staff. And I think that the same thing probably applies in some of these situations where it's like, hey man, at this point, everybody's got to go. We need a full clean house to see a different thing. And it's not to say that there's no one making good decisions, but at the leadership structure, you got to have a new coach. You got to have a new coaching staff. You got to bring in a whole nother thing. Did you see that? I saw this the other day too, that Mike Vrabel over at the Patriots, he cut Joe Cardona, the punter. And he was the last connection to Belichick. So now there's literally nobody in the building that has any connection to Belichick. That's hilarious, though. But it also reflects that they felt like they had to make a complete and total move, right? A complete and total change. And so maybe that's what needs to happen in the city of Worcester. We need a complete and total change in leadership structure, and then maybe we can start the process. I don't think we've started the process towards healing, Tom, until we get to that point. And I think we're just going to continue to fight until we get to that point.
Either they don't understand it, if that's actually going to take, or they just don't care, because they just don't care. Because they just we wrote some stuff. We have new policies, but we're not even going to mention that. Because we have a new chief, that's somehow going to miraculously make our internal investigations credible. It's not.
Yeah,
it's not. It's just not. I mean, it's a controversial person, admittedly, but somebody just went to the police department, wanted to file a report,
Yeah.
and we're told, well, there's already a report on that, and I'm not going to go against another officer. What?
Yeah.
I've never heard anywhere in my life of anybody going to the police department and asking for a report to be filed and then being told no. And it seems to happen here quite a lot.
It does. It does. It's like, you can't file that, and so that's it's just, it's just not the right thing.
So
All right,
if that's
we're
the
at
mentality there. What makes
2:04.
you think your internal investigation is going to be any different? Maybe they'll,
Yeah.
they'll be better. It won't be so obvious in the report. Maybe they'll, be smarter about it because there's scrutiny. But I mean, and then we're just going to we'll just let Post handle it, who's got every cop in the state and is going to be dependent on funding from the State House, which, at their whim, they could just whack its funding. And then, God knows what happens. And I got that from not those words, but that sentiment that yeah, they're doing good work, but the Post is, but it's dependent on funding. I got that from the executive director. He said it in a public meeting here, or a community meeting here. Yeah, things are going well now, but it's all dependent on funding. And we're going to just depend on the State House because the State House does so much good stuff for us in Worcester. We're just dependent on that. So, no, but if there's no enforcement of these policies, they're not worth the paper they're written on. And you should have had some of these policies 20 years ago, 10 years ago. So like patting yourself on the back that you've created policy. I'm not saying it's not hard work. It is. There's a whole process that goes through. The chief went through that recently. I'm not saying it's not hard work. I'm just saying, why should we have any confidence that any of this is going to be enforced? Your internal investigations have a long track record of being a clown show. And if the city manager wanted, and if anybody disputes this, the city manager could easily just release the last 20 years of Bob's reports, and we could all look at them. But he's not going to do that because he knows what's in them.
Yeah.
And so he'll make us play this game of, if we know the exact case, and you got to ask for a bunch of officer identification cards so you can get the actual case number, so you can ask for the specific report, or it's not specific enough. And that's not a whack on the people in the public records division or public records in City Hall. It's the law sucks. And they're just
happened to that transparent dashboard?
Yeah.
Remember all the records?
Release all the boss reports. If you want us to have faith in this division inside the
release.
Let's look at the track record. But they're not going to do that. They won't even talk about it. They won't. Enforcement was mentioned for the first time since the DOJ report came out. Enforcement of policies was mentioned by the mayor once this past 2 meetings ago. Last time the chief was there, he asked him a question about enforcement, and that's all we thought. That's the extent of the conversation. Nothing about how because they just they're just going to be followed because they exist because the chief is who he is. I mean, I like the chief, still supporting him, but he's not God. He's not going to just materialize things to be true. So it's ridiculous. And they don't even want to have the conversation. They just want to, we got new policies and, we'll just talk about the things that the DOJ report. The DOJ report was supposed to be a wake-up call, not like the Bible. And then we'll just focus on the report. Screw the report. Wake up.
Was it? All right, we promised that we wouldn't go to 2.5 hours. We're at 2:07 right now.
It is time for John's favorite part of the show.
And for all of those who watch, that I have to deal with this every week. Tom spreading misinformation about this part of the show, which is by far universally all the fans of the show. This is their favorite part. And this week, for the first time, Tom, we actually have a community member who has asked the question this time. So you have a community member who's asked the question, and so the question is going
to be better than your crappy questions. Then.
No, so maybe my questions might not be good. But the community seems to love this thing, which is Tom's favorite things. And this week's question is, Tom, what is your favorite police show? That is of all time. What is your favorite police show of all time? And that is that is not true. Worcester MAGA also spreading misinformation. This is brought to you by our one of our favorite regular viewers, Maria, is asking this question. So you have to answer it seriously. What is your favorite cop show of all time?
First of all, I have to strenuously object. Did I not just scream "wake up" a minute ago?
Yeah. No, you did yell. You
yelled.
You also
slander, Maria. Slander.
You're mean to me sometimes.
Oh, I don't yell at you. I yell about
No,
them. I'm gonna go with the oldie but a goodie, NYPD Blue.
Dennis Franz, right? Dennis Franz's butt, the butt around the world, right? It led to a bunch of men walking around.
What was the other show he was on way back? It was a cop show.
Hill Street Blues?
Yes, it was like my dad's favorite show ever. So I remember that from when I was, before I remember things almost. But yeah, I'm gonna go with the oldie.
All right, so if I was gonna I have categories of cop shows because I think that there's some that are just unbelievably good. But I've talked about this a little bit before. My favorite all-time cop show is Homicide: Life on the Streets, by Andre Braugher. Just unbelievable performance, well-written show, well-acted show, really tough subjects. Before Law and Order SVU came along and started showing, the college rape of the week, Homicide: Life on the Streets was dealing with real cases in real time, and man, what a tough show that was. And then if you're gonna go nonsensical cop shows, it's TJ Hooker all day, dude, all day.
Yeah.
William Shatner jumping in slow motion over a railing, sliding on the top of the car. Those are just
one. Stacy, I can't think of his last name. The guy who played, the guy who played Al Bundy. The guy who played, oh God, I can't think of his name either. Archie Bunker. Well, he had a cop show after all that. My dad loved that show too.
So let's see, Stacy Keach. I forget the name of the show that he was. Was it Mike Hammer?
No,
Mike Hammer. What was the show that he was on? I
can't remember.
Oh man, the one from All in the Family was it was based on the movie. And it was the Southern Sheriff and the guy. Oh my goodness, how can I not remember this? This is unbelievable.
Oh yeah, not Stacey. It's Carol O'Connor.
It's Carol O'Connor. Yeah. Hold on, I'm looking it up right now. And it was.
We have to know before we go. We have to know.
I will. I'm working on it right now. I'm going right now because I just have to find. Oh my goodness, where is the acting credits? I'm like.
In the Heat of the Night.
In the Heat of the Night, which of course the movie version, Sidney Poitier won or was nominated for. He was the first Black actor to win an Academy Award for Lilies of the Field, but he was also nominated for In the Heat of the Night, the movie version, right? And was he in the TV show too? I forget if Sidney Poitier was in the TV show as well.
We got a Magnum PI. No.
Magnum. Man, that's just Maria likes what's his name's chest hair. That's it. That's all that is.
Mustache that he's on another cop show now, ain't he?
Yeah. Oh my goodness, the New York one where he's the commissioner, right? I forget that.
It's not bad, but it's like chock full of propaganda.
Blue Bloods, and then making another. By the way, controversy in the film community. They're making another one that's like a Boston Blue Bloods with Donnie Wahlberg. Donnie Wahlberg, and they're making it part of it in Canada. And so everybody's upset here in the local film community because you're gonna make a Boston show, but you're not gonna do it here. But then the tariffs started with Canada.
Isn't that one of his stupid things? Tariffs on foreign movies.
Yeah, movie tariffs, which of course is impossible because some movies are made in 63 places, so there's no way to do that. Hey, real quick too before you go, anybody who's still left, we go into production tomorrow for Old Friends. That is by local actress Allison Rothwell. We're going to be shooting in Easton and Norton starting on Tuesday, but tomorrow's the first day. So go on Hollywood.com. That's Hollywood with 3 O's, or HollywoodFilmGroup.com. click on old friends. And if you want to help out or join in, there are some opportunities. If you would like to be an extra on Tuesday, you can get on set and become an extra. So there's some chances for things to do that. But yeah, we got a movie starting tomorrow. We're in full production tomorrow, which means I will not be there on Tuesday for the city council meeting. It'll be the first one I miss in about 7 months. But I'll be back the following week to do the finance committee stuff, where Tom and I will just drag them over every line item in the budget.
And except for John, everybody should show up on Tuesday. You don't have to speak. You don't have to do any of that. Just show up. Just be seen.
Just show up. Yeah, absolutely. I don't know if the metal detectors will be installed by then, but apparently they're going to install some metal detectors now because of an incident on Friday.
What happened? Well, I don't even know about this.
I don't know. Somebody was wandering around City Hall, and so the city
We
manager.
need to spend millions of dollars to make sure they're secure.
Something like that. Something's going to happen. So just, be prepared for that. If you come and there's more security, that might be a thing. Also, it's likely that there's going to be a higher tension on Tuesday because of what just happened on Thursday. So there might be a bigger police presence. Generally, that means Captain Early will be there with his crew. But we'll see. We'll see how the response.
To Captain Early's credit, he is really good with people that are upset.
Yeah, he does. They deploy him to keep things calm. There's no doubt about that. He definitely is the calm guy.
And no, that meeting's on Tuesday. There's a meeting on Tuesday that's a regular agenda before they do the finance stuff, which is going to go on for 3 meetings, and there's weeks off in between. It's going to go on forever. Yeah. And then there is a meeting Tuesday, and there is
public safety meeting scheduled for Wednesday at 5:00. So
you can't be there for that either, can you?
I can't be there for either. So you're gonna go to that. Mandy's gonna cover Tuesday. Mandy's gonna go and cover Tuesday, and then I can't go to either. Yes, I'm making a movie.
Fired.
I might be able to call in. I just don't think I can be there in person. So I might still make it on Zoom.
Go make films, young filmmaker. Go make films. All right. You got anything else?
No, that's it.
All right. Thank you for everybody who participated. For having a name Worcester MAGA, you actually said some things that made sense, which surprised me. So thank you, and thank everybody else for your comments and questions and whatever. If we missed stuff, apologize. You're welcome to harass us in the future if we miss something. And other than that, you are not shooting next Sunday, I hope.
I'm not. I will be back on the show on Sunday.
All right. So until next time, we will try to screw it up less next time. Until then, have a great week, everybody. This week at Worcester out.
Not finger guns, just point. I don't want to get in trouble with the NBA